Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. Effective multi-agency collaboration is paramount during major incidents, yet capturing lessons from complex events poses significant challenges. This episode sees Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service outline its strategic implementation of ISARR, a dedicated organisational learning and lessons management platform.
Firstly, thanks for taking the time to obviously listen to us this afternoon. And we're going to focus on the learning aspect of that multi-agency response and making sure that, or sharing with you the learning and the journey we've been on over the last few years to try and maximise that learning across the multi-agency sphere and sharing of learning. So just to introduce myself, my name's Neil Sadler. I'm an area manager in Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service. My area of the service covers preparedness, training, both non-operational and operational, and leadership and development. And I'm joined by Matt.
Afternoon, everybody. Matt Butler, Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service. I'm the head of joint operations, and I oversee organisational learning.
Thank you. So we're going to use operational Boxboard, which was a major incident that we attended in 2024 in response to Storm Bert, as a bit of a case study to show you how the system that we are working with now from a company called ISARR is helping us share and sort of identify, capture the learning, analyse, and then implement change in the organisation, to include that assurance process of making sure that that all of the learning we've captured has actually been implemented. So the journey for us, we've had a digital platform for a number of years now, in fact since 2014 when the joint operations team was formed. And the reason we use a bespoke digital platform is because we're not resource heavy. We don't have people that can evaluate learning and spend lots and lots of time on going through all of the various contributions from different agencies. So we want the system to do the heavy lifting, essentially, and allow my team to focus on evaluating that learning and really pulling some of the key points from those contributions. So, as I said, we've had that digital platform. We were experiencing some real challenges with that platform around sharing, both internally and externally. And some of the auditing and the record keeping was not as accurate as we would have liked, and required manual processes to give the assurance of making sure there's no gaps. And we've also supported Northampton Police. So the team that Matt manages is a joint team between Northampton Police and Northampton Fire, with our LRF colleagues, local resilience forum colleagues, embedded in that team as well. And because we carry out learning slightly different to police and our LRF colleagues, sometimes, certainly through COVID times, when we were looking at learning through the COVID response, that was our responsibility, or we took the ownership of that to make sure that we captured the learning and shared it across the multi-agency response. So as a result of all of that, when we came to renew our previous system, we set out some clear specifications that we didn't want to set up a single agency system. We wanted it to be a multi-agency system, and we went into collaboration with Northampton Police and our LRF as a whole. So what that means is the system has 3 clients essentially, and any learning that we have as a single agency, we can give access to police or to the LRF via the tactical leads or strategic leads. So Matt's just put up on the screen there. You may not be able to see some of the detail on there, but essentially this is how the system was built. And we were very fortunate that we were due to go live in September, October last year, and the lessons management framework from the UK Resilience Academy was published, which gave us an opportunity to pause the go live and make sure that the system is aligned to the various good practice documents available to us. So the system has been built using the lessons management best practice guide, national operational good practice guide through the fire sector, College of Policing briefing and debriefing, and through the JESSOP joint organisational learning portal. So and the way the system works, and you can see there's 3 flows there. We have the top flow, which is around identifying and capturing learning. So how do we capture that learning across the different agencies? Now, we can bring learning from our staff in fire, or we can send learning or request learning for anyone outside of the system. And all they need to do is reply to that email. When they reply, it comes back into the system, into a central pool, which then Matt's team will evaluate at our monthly learning meetings. And that could be operational learning, it could be organisational learning as a whole, so from our senior leadership team visits or our community impact assessments or wellbeing impact assessments. We aim to put all learning into the system to enable us to, one, so we don't duplicate actions and lessons, and everything's being recorded in one platform. At that first phase as well, we have the ability to run some incident assurance, so some real specific areas. If we've changed a policy or we're working on Grenfell arena actions, we can focus specifically on one action and record through the system or carry out that incident assurance to make sure that we are actually embedding the learning. So when the system's gone through that identifying and capturing learning, we'll make an assessment then whether that needs to be a lesson or whether we can just share that learning straight away. So if it's a simple good practice that some of our staff have raised that we want to share across the service, we can do that from a click of a button. It sends it to everyone in the service via the email system, and they can access the platform itself. And that learning also gets shared then wider, should we choose to. And I think that's the key point around data sharing and making sure that the system is secure and our data is secure. We only share data if we approve it, if it's been assessed, sanitised, and that we're able to share that data with no obviously identifiable information being shared. So that's in our full control, and Matt's team will make the assessment on whether that's shared externally or not. If the evaluation of that learning results in a significant change, we would progress that to a lesson. And in the system, I'll talk about the lessons module in detail in a little while, but the system allows us to create a lesson and manage that from start to finish. So the implementation plan, the embedding process over a set period of time, whether that's reviews or we conduct structured debriefs, etc., we can make sure that they're recorded in the system and we've got a full audit record from start to finish, that learning has been embedded. And that links to, I said earlier on around the Grenfell arena, Manchester arena, or the national inquiries. They would come or they can come into the system at the lessons stage because they've already gone through the evaluation outside of the service. We would create a lesson and then we track all of our actions through the system and the action tracker within the system. I'm not going to talk massively on the action tracker because it is simply an action tracker, but as you would expect, it has all of the features around deadlines and a full audit record of who's accessing those actions and what progress is being made with them.
So just before we walk you through a case study, which is Operation Boxboard, which was a multi-agency response within Northamptonshire, we just want to highlight some things, how using this system that's been provided by ISARR has changed our ways of working and operating. You know, those of you that are here today that capture organisational learning, you're probably asking, why is this different to anything that you've already got in place? We've drawn out some key areas that we wanted to sort of spotlight as to how this system has changed the way we operate as a service. So Neil's mentioned a few things already. The fire and rescue sector are unique in some ways to other blue light responders in that we give the opportunity of all of our staff to contribute to learning. So having access to a system that's really intuitive, user friendly, was one of the first things on our kind of checklist. So sitting down with ISARR and having that single sign-on process where an email address is attributed to a member of staff and they can create some feedback and a debrief when they're on duty was one of the things that we wanted to ensure that we continue doing. Also, the system itself, how it's navigated, how we share information and push information out to staff. That's some of the things that have been highlighted through the fire standards around operational learning, as well as some of the things that HMI look at when they're doing their inspections. You know, how are we sharing learning from strategic level that have been identified across the organisation with all of our staff, both operational and non-operational. And the ability of this system is that we've got 500 plus staff that all have the ability to log into the system, to interact with it, and also to receive information in a timely manner. And as Neil said, we can decide what information we share and when we share it, so we don't overload our staff. We've been on a journey like a lot of public sector organisations where we've had to look at our current operating system software, and we've had to introduce a lot of new things in quick succession. So what we wanted to ensure that when we rolled this system out, we didn't overload our staff. We didn't have comprehensive training packages or tutorials. We very much made staff aware of its existence. We've worked with ISARR to build some very helpful user guides within the system that you can click on, and it explains what actually you're asked to do when you're interacting with the system. And we found that in the 9 months now we've been live with the system, we've had no inquiries in terms of concerns around how to operate the system, any issues with the system itself. But we've had a considerable amount of footfall and interaction with the system, with over 15,000 page view hits from our staff, which in an organisation of just over 500 people is a significant amount of traffic in terms of interaction with the site, particularly in such a short timescale. Neil mentioned about information security. So again, we are mindful of the information that we're publishing and the ability to build groups within the system that we can share. So we have a senior leadership team group, we have an organisational learning group, we have a all operational group, so we can select who we share that information with based on the level of security classification for that information, which again was something that was really key to us. Likewise with partners, the ability to access the system from outside of the organisation was something that we needed to manage. And the ability to be able to use email addresses to ask contributors for debriefs and information is something that we've tested over the last sort of 12 months of the testing phase, particularly around some of the significant incidents that have occurred in the UK, where we've reached out to colleagues from across the fire sector, not just specifically to Northamptonshire, and we've been able to draw down from their feedback and their contributions to then build that overall organisational and sector learning picture. So, talking about Operation Boxboard, we're just going to walk you through now a bit of a case study. So last year, there was some significant flooding events across the UK, and at random times of the year, we had one in January, we had one around September time, and then we had one sort of November. This one is in relation to a significant flooding event that we had in Northamptonshire around November time. And using the system, and the top right-hand corner there is illustrating that process flow that Neil talked about around how we use the system. So the initial stage, the capture phase, is where we looked at, we've had this event, now we want to create some learning and identify if there's ways we can improve, both us as a fire service, but equally in a multi-agency sphere. So what we did was we initiated the debrief. We identified who had attended the scene, and at this particular incident, there was well over 100 responders. So we collated that information and then pushed out a contribution for them. And you can't really see it, but in the sort of illustration there is a tab that says contributions. And by having the tab turned on, that enables the system to pull all of those contributions in, from internal contributions to external contributions, into one big flow, which then enables us to then extract any commonalities from the feedback. So things like that we see commonly in the fire service: welfare provisions, rotation of crews, equipment that's not fit for purpose. Those sorts of things will be highlighted in those contributions, for example. So using the system, we reached out to our partners. Again, you can see there in the blue boxes, under the Civil Contingencies Act, we've got a far sort of reach of who we're looking to connect with and get that learning from. So not just blue light responders, but category 2 responders, the voluntary sector as well, hugely important in assisting us, not only in our operating sort of principles, but also from learning, so how we can improve our relationship with them moving forwards. And last year we used our volunteer sector within Northamptonshire on all 3 occasions. So the major incident flooding, we've reached out, we've then taken those items, those bits of learning that have been raised with us, and then we start that process.
So, and again, apologies because you won't be able to see some of the slides, but we had 14 different agencies respond as part of that contribution request, which adds a huge amount of value to the contributions that we receive, rather than if we're looking at command and control, fire service raising that there's some learning within command and control. If we see that across different agencies, then it becomes a bit of a bigger problem, a bigger issue. So when we look at prioritising those lessons or the learning that comes in, if we've had multiple responses from multiple agencies, it just helps us give some weight to how we actually address that learning. If it's something small that an individual has raised, and it doesn't mean that it's no more significant than any of the other contributions, but it just allows us to evidence that there's only this contribution that states that that was an issue, therefore we don't need to prioritise that as high as some of the others. So some of the screenshots you can see on there, and I'm more than happy, because you really struggle to see these here afterwards. If anyone wants to discuss and see some more information or a bit more detail, please let me know. But on the left-hand side of the screen there, that's all the themes that come from those 14 contributions. So we had learning that was identified in command and tactics, GESUP, resourcing, the command skills, planning and briefing, and the list goes on, which is really good. And it's a great problem to have, isn't it? So if staff and responders are giving us this information, it allows us to do something with it, rather than that being hidden and then potentially on the next instant not being addressed, and then obviously something failing or not happening. So it's a real good problem to have. And then what we would do from all of that information is decide whether we need to create any lessons, build them into a lesson, and then we will obviously assign that through to an owner and go through an implementation process. We can use actions and lessons differently in the system. So if there's a minor change, we can assign an action to an individual for them to complete, and that just gets ticked off and it's kept in the system for record. Or if we decide that there's a bigger change, that's when we'll use the lessons module. So that sits at that analyse and the identify stage, or part of our process, and then we would go into, let's say, creating a lesson. The lessons module on the system has been designed to and aligned directly to the resilience lessons management framework, and has the prioritisation matrix, which you can see in the middle picture there. Appreciate it's very small. I'll stop saying that. But so we identify a lesson. As soon as it's created in the system, it requires you to provide a root cause. And this is really key to understand what that actual lesson is, or how can we affect change if we don't know what the root cause is. So using all of the contributions, using some of the instant assurance process that we would have gone through, structured debrief if we decide that we're going to escalate from a digital debrief to a structured debrief, all of those methods of capturing those contributions, we will assess, pull all the evidence out, and then identify that root cause. As soon as we've identified the root cause, we would go on to that prioritisation, and that's using the matrix in the system, which is configurable in terms of individual organisations. But we've got obviously some of the priority 1 matrix set to immediate action, and so on as it goes to priority 4.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the emergency services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
The lessons and the drop-downs within the lessons module allow us to align those to various guidance documents, for example, NOG scenarios, that's the National Operational Guidance scenarios within fire. We've also got drop-downs to align the learning to the national risk registers and our community risk registers. So when we come to reassessing or building those for the future, we can pull lessons out of the system and understand exactly where our lessons or our learning is themed, if you like. So after prioritisation, you would assign an owner, and then obviously they build that implementation plan, and it's all recorded in the system. Every interaction with the system is recorded to provide a full audit trail. And when that implementation has been built and started, we would then go into that embedding process. So the last bit of the lessons module is an embedding process. We don't set a specific time to embed learning because all lessons are different in terms of their size and complexity. But if we agreed that we want to see over the next 6 months a change because we've had a Grenfell action, and I'll take the fire survival guidance, if we wanted to assess that the training or the change that we've implemented has been embedded, we can set specific review periods within the system. That may be testing and exercising, that may be us engaging with staff to gain their understanding through pulse surveys. There's various methods we can do that. When we carry out those activities, we would then build them into the system and record that we've carried out an assessment. This is what was observed against, obviously, the lesson. And we'll do that over a period of time. And then at an agreed time through one of our board meetings, that lesson will be closed and agreed to be closed. That gets archived in the system and sits there attached to the debrief. Our staff can still view that debrief, so the transparency for staff is key, understanding what we're doing and how we're implementing change, to a point where the debrief itself gets archived, and that's down to individual services retention policies. But the key thing is, if we are ever asked for information relating to that debrief, we will be able to access all of the actions, all of the lessons, any reports we've shared, and who's interacted with that debrief. Which is really valuable. So including incident documentation, such as our analytical risk assessments, command logs, any CCTV from the incident, we can record all of that in that debrief with the lessons and the actions so that everything is in one place. And that was one of the challenges we've had in the past, was making sure that all of our information data is held in one place, or we can access that data. And the system allows us to do that.
Yeah, so as Neil said, once we've completed that phase, we're now going to talk about the report. So what does that final report look like? How do we share that information with our staff? So the system enables us to do a number of things. We can obviously publish the debriefs, and we've talked about the audience that we can share that with. It can be a large audience or a small select few. But then what we can also do is we can publish reports. So reports that we've generated within the system, or that we've created or taken from other sources. So examples being the Grenfell Tower inquiry report, the Manchester Arena reports. we can bring those into the system and publish them as reports and share them with our staff. And then, as Neil mentioned, it may, as a consequence, generate a lesson and a subsequent set of actions. But the reports tab enables us to share information with staff, both stuff that we've created and we've brought in from external, again, keeping it all in one place. Another example being this summer, again, we were anticipating a lot of heat and warm weather. So we look back at 2022 when we had the heat wave. Prior to this system, we had a number of PDF documents that were manually produced in terms of highlighting learning from the heat wave. We did a gap analysis on those. We created a report, and then we put this on the system and shared it with our staff. So in anticipation of this year's risks, we shared on the system our understanding of what we learned from 2022 as a part of also a wider communications piece around the work that we were doing in terms of investment and training in our organisation to bring staff back up to speed with managing this type of climate risk. The other thing that we can do with the system is, again, having a broader range of members having access to it, such as the Local Resilience Forum, both at exec level and strategic. We can create reports and then we can publish them on the system, again, making them accessible for a wide variety of audience. And what we can also do then is by publishing it on there, we can make it in the right format for the LRF, for example, under the branding, make it accessible. And then by using some of the analytics and tracking systems that are built in the system, see what that interaction's like with that particular report to help us shape those reports moving forwards, to understand, for example, the length of the report, whether it's getting a lot of interaction or maybe it's too much information and therefore we need to scale it back for the audience that it's intended for. On dashboards and analytics, this was something else that was key for us. Again, some of the inspectorate and the questions that they ask around how do we share information with our staff, how do we do audit and assurance. We have our own, obviously, internal governance process for monitoring our organisational and operational learning. And some of the things that really caught our eye with this system was the ability to build our own dashboards to report on particular areas that were of interest to us. So again, looking at the number of debriefs that we collate over the year and the ability for all staff to contribute to debriefs. As a fire and rescue service, we can have probably in excess of 100 debriefs over a year. So therefore, we can start to look at trends. You know, are there things that our staff are telling us that are persistently happening in the operational environment that we may not be actually recognising previously using our old operational learning system? So the dashboard there has a number of configurations that you can set and define yourself. Obviously, a lot of us like colour and shapes rather than text. So using pie charts, bar graphs, we're able to extract common themes that pull out from the learning that's been contributed in terms of what are the common things that we're noticing. So is it command and control? Is it equipment? Is it resources? And then we can start to track if there is a pattern that's starting to emerge. Likewise, contributing agencies, so we can look at who are contributing and interacting with our requests for feedback. And again, the pie chart there illustrates that it's a nice, healthy picture. And being landlocked, we've only had one contribution from the Coast Guard, which is pleasing to see. But again, from a multi-agency point of view, police, ambulance, environment agency, key players that you would expect in an incident such as major flooding, there has been a lot of interaction and contributions from those agencies, and the dashboard illustrates that nicely. And then again, being NOG compliant, we can look at the NOG scenarios. So again, if we're looking at themes, is it fires and firefighting? Is it rescues and performing rescues? What are the things that we're noticing that are being highlighted by our staff? And is that because we have a particular specialism, or we don't have a specialism, and therefore the learning is highlighting that there is a need for that capability review, and we're able to identify that through some of the reporting mechanisms. The analytics side of things, and there's not an illustration of that here, but again, is a really good tool for us to use. So what we can do is we can track interaction with the system. I mentioned around 15,000 plus page views since going live the 1st of October last year. That's how many people have clicked on pages and looked at information we've shared. We do audit and assurance, so we look monthly around how many people are looking at the site, how many people are clicking on particular learning, and again, that helps us understand, are we pushing information out too quickly, in too much of a bulk? Are we sending it out on a Friday afternoon and we're noticing that there's a lull until later on the following week in terms of staff interaction? And because everyone's got a single sign-on, we're able to see who's interacting with the system and ultimately who's not. So if we want to share a health and safety alert, for example, and highlight a particular issue, we can also look at the analytics to say that we've, out of our 500 members of staff, currently had 150 people click on that document. So rather than having a specific click to confirm process, we know who's looking at our information and when and where and how long for. Because even if you really want to drill down to the minutiae, we can see that the average page interaction is around 15 seconds. So the analytics can be used in a variety of ways that you want them to. We use it to help us understand what our behaviours are of our staff, what they're looking at, when they're looking at it, and then it helps us tailor that information moving forwards.
I think just before we go into this one, Matt, the one of the charts on there was a heat map. I think that's really useful to understand where our learning's coming from. So we have our stations built into the system, and we can see from the heat map exactly where all of the learning's coming from. So that also helps us understand perhaps some stations that may not be submitting learning, or there's a particular issue at that station. Cross map that against our instant data, and then we can start to understand where the demand is and the specific issues, and that's where some of the reporting is going to really benefit us as a service going forwards. And it's on the next slide, but I'll touch on it here because we've talked a lot about analytics. We've talked about evaluating information within the system. We're just working on, and hopefully as a service we can have it. I'll look at some of our colleagues out there around artificial intelligence and building that into the system. So as I said earlier on, we are not resource heavy as an organisation. We have a really small learning team, and we want the system to do the heavy lifting for us. AI is not a solution to go, okay, we don't need anyone to interact with it anymore. AI will do it all. It's purely a tool that helps process information and helps us understand some of the trends and information that's coming into the system, and removes any bias, because those individuals that are evaluating the data within the system may be involved in some of the incidents that they're evaluating. Using that AI helps us remove some of the bias. So some of the where we would like to be with AI is our HMI inspections, building them into the system and enabling us to look at how we compare across the country, looking how those HMI inspections compare to the learning that's coming into the system, and really trying to maximise that technology or the functionality of the system to prompt us to discuss and review some of the data. So I think the AI is if it arrives on our platform, and I know it's available in the system, it's definitely there, and we've got a joint system with police and the LRF, so we need to make sure that the security is all boxed off and is key before we build that into the system. But essentially it works on our data set only. It's not open AI, and it's only looking at our data, but that will certainly help us develop some of those trends going forwards.
One of the other key system features that we liked is we don't want to be a faceless service. So yes, it's an automated system. We can push out and request people to provide information, but it still enables us to go out and do structured debriefs. So we host a number of debriefs this year where we've gone out and we've used the system on a laptop whilst we've been talking to people, and we've been in front of them, listening to frustrations primarily, but also some positive feedback. And then we can use the system to capture that. So initially we go out for electronic contributions. We can open up the particular debrief again to capture structured face-to-face contributions. We can perform some incident assurance, and then we can assimilate all of that information before we get to the reporting and publishing stage. So it's a key feature that enables us to, once we've we've closed it down or we're happy that we've got all of the electronic contributions doesn't mean that we have to publish it there and then. And we've got a number of incidents at the moment where we're just about to host some structured face-to-face debriefs with staff to just finalise and give everyone that opportunity to contribute before we move through the latter stages of the process.
And I think that scalability is really good. It's really valuable because reading those contributions before we carry out a structured debrief can shape some of the conversations or prompt us as debriefers to ask questions and really dig into the detail of why people provided those contributions in the first place. And is it actually a thing or is it not? So do we need to do anything about it? And I think that the scalability of being able to have one person submit a debrief to us or an instant hitting a trigger that automatically triggers a debrief to sending that debrief internally, externally, and really bringing that learning from as many people as we can gives us that rich data to assess those lessons.
Yeah, and like you were saying, if you need to make change and we've identified a lesson, using the lesson management framework, it talks about in that document about having a tracker. So the system is the tracker. So in the lessons management framework, it shows like a spreadsheet in essence. And we've spoken to some people that, in other LRFs that are still using Excel spreadsheets to capture tasks, actions and monitor progress, which, we have done. And we're in the process of transferring some onto the system. But that auditable tracker is the system. So we've generated at the moment 7 lessons. Some originate from our service, some nationally from recommendations such as Manchester and Grenfell. But it's an auditable tracker, so we can dive into it and see, actually, we made a change 6 months ago, and one of the ones last year was around multi-agency information cells. Do we have all of our staff and colleagues co-locate when they need to perform that function? And it was identified early in the year that we didn't. So we made a change to our procedures, to our report, our notifications, and how we do it. And then what we can do is we can perform an implementation review using the system, and that's the tracker. So we've now got 6 months worth of evidence to show testing and exercising where we've had a multi-agency information cell. Operation Boxboard, we instigated a multi-agency information cell. So we can go back into the system and go, 6 months ago, we identified this as a lesson. We've made a change. Here's the evidence of where the change has been made. And actually, we can show that we've made positive improvements moving forwards.
We are very nearly out of time. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask of Matt or Neil?
Yeah, thanks very much. Just wanted to ask how it interacts with Resilience Direct's joint organisational online platform.
So the way we have our national organisational learning, and obviously Joel and Noel notes that come through. At the moment, they come into the lesson. So if a Joel note is published, if that's an action note, it will come into our system as a lesson, and then we will go through and assess, obviously, the implementation and what we need to do, how many what actions need to be carried out to implement that change. And that's the same with, as we said, about the inquiries and any other external learning that comes in. I think the other way around is if we need to submit a JOL submission through that evaluation phase, there's numerous flags in the system that we've configured ourselves, and the system is very versatile in terms of what you want or what we want in the system. We've been able to create, and then we can report on those. So one of the if we decide that learning is worthy of a JOL submission, then the system allows us to brag rate that, and we'll select, and it will say you need to submit a JOL submission, null submission, and then what we do is we do that obviously through the relevant portals, and we copy the text into the platform to make sure there's a record of that in the system. I don't know if you want to add to that, Matt.
Just any lessons identified or notable practice that's shared on Resilience Direct to the sector. So things that have been identified elsewhere that are for wider sharing, we bring those into the system where they're relevant to the fire sector. So It could be around, I don't know, a particular incident in a tall building, for example, and it was created as a national operational learning or even a joint learning. We will share that with staff. So the ability to carry out continual professional development, whilst we don't mandate staff read them, because they're just identifying good practice, we put them on the system to support CPD. And then, like Neil said, anything that's an actual action note where there's something we need to do, the system enables us to track, monitor progress and assure that we've carried out and discharged that action.
And all of those link. So within the system, we can say that, well, that action note links to this particular debrief, or Matt mentioned earlier around the flooding. So we've talked about Op Boxboard. The incident earlier on in the year was Op Yeovil. So we know that we've linked both of them together. And if there was a Joel submission that comes out relating to flooding, we would link that into those debriefs as well. So that when you access one of them, you can see all of the other submissions.
Thank you so much. We are going to have to leave it there. For now, if you can join me in thanking Matt and Neil from Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.